أبز الصومون እትሰምዕዎ ዓበይቲ ዜናታት بقدامነት استاذنا سرنا سلام زغانخا عصفقنا مسغنካ ደስ ይብለና እቲ ንሓርበኛ አቦና አለምሰገድ ተስፋይ ብዝምልከት ካብቲ ንሕና ዘቅረብናዮ ብሰፍሐ አድሚቕካ ዘቅረብካዮ ጽሑፍ ኣዝዩ ደስ ዝብል ኮይኑ ረኺብና ያለና ደጊምና የቀኔና ንብል ብዘይካዚ ዝኸበርኩም ተኸታተልትና ነቲ ብዛዕባ አለምሰገድ ተስፋይ ዘቅረብናዮ ምስጋና ብዝለዓለ አኽብሮትን ብተወሳኺ ርእይቶኹምን ዝሃብቶምኩሞ ከነመስግነኩም ንደሊም ፍላይ ድማ ሓደ ተኸታታላይና ንኣለምሰገድ ተስፋይ ሓደ ዓቢ ናይ ጅግነት መዳልያ ክወሃቦ ይግባእ እዩ ዝብል ዝሃቦ ርእይቶ ቅቡል ሓሳብ ምዃኑ ከነስምረሉ ንደሊም እዚ እቲ ብእወታ ዝግለጽ ኮይኑ እቲ ዘገርም ትዕዝብትና ግና ብዝርጋሕ መጽሓፍ ናይዚ ሃገራዊ ታሪኽና ስለምንታይ ብሕብሕብእ ክካየድ ዝድለ ዘሎ ከይገረመን ኣይተረፈን ከም ዝመስለኒ እቲ ስንፍና ሓደ ናይቲ ቆንስል ድኹም ሕልና ክኸውን እንከሎ እቲ ካልእ ድማ ኣብ ከምዚ ኣጋጣሚታት ክርብሽ ዝኽእል ተቃዋሚ ዝብል ዓጋፉ ስጋእ ዝፈጥሩ እንተኾይኖም እዚኦም ከዳዓት እምበር ተቃዋምቲ ኢልካ ዝግለጹ ይኮኑን መን ብዝፈጠረልካ ኤርትራ ኢኻ ተቃዋሚ ናይ ኤርትራ ተባሂልካ ትግለጽ ታሪኽ ሃገር ደጋፊ ይኹን ተቃዋሚ ብማዕረ ኸባራትዕዎ ዝግባእ ነገር ምዃኑ ክፍለጥ ዝግባእ ኮይኑ እቶም ቁኑዓት ተቃዋምቲ ኣብቲ ነዛ መጽሓፍ ናይ ኣለምሰገድ ተስፋይ ክገጹ ዝተረኽቡ ንልዑል ብስለቶምን ኣኽብረቶምን ምስጋና ዝግብኦም እዩ زغبركم تخاتاتولتنا نابتقن دا أرستنا خن مرسكم ماتيو زلالم زدالو صحفينا حيزنا قريبنا زلنا سرناي مكتال نابلنا سعيد محمد مساهم اللخو بقتا نابتحو السلام
إرترا لبو غفيتو سلس تعزبو إز السعب بالسرات كانك قالحو فقيدو لنا يركب رجت سلام نمتو كواس تدالو التاودي أفلا ماي نقلو صمدونا بولو إنه بوغن هاقري يزفنو بالسرات هذا كلهم اكتيفيستات تግራይ ንሰላም ክልቲኡ ህዝብታት ጠቅም ስራሕ ንኽትሰርሑ መንግስቲ ኤርትራ ዝኽል ክላይ ኮነን እሞ ኣብ ዝደለኹም ሰዓት ክትኣትውን ክትወጹን ትኽእሉ ኢኹም ኢልኩም ይርከብ
ወገን ትግራይ ይኹን ብወገን ኤርትራ ብዘይ ወግዓውያን ሰበስልጣናት ዝወፁ ዘለዉ ወግዓዊ ዝመስል መግለፂታት ዝተፈላለዩ ኤሊታት ዝህብዎ ዘለዉ ዝተፈላለዩ መልሲ ተግባራትን ክንዕዘቦ ፀኒሕና ኣለና لتتعزبتنا نمصمع أبكلت الزعبة خفينا نقربينا تي بقدامي نسمع زلنا مرسى تكبر بركز بولي إليتات نتتصمدوتات بقوتها بمرأي مونغو هزبت رايزي كونه بوليتيكينياتات مراحتي بوقعن بزرزرن بتكالاو من قد خقلت علوز باليوم زي وقن ورا وقن دو زبلن ناب مكببارن متحبارن زابت حساب زخونه كدفع اللو زبلو بغلت يوم وقنات ዝስማዕ ርእይቶታት እዩ ገለገለ ኤሊታት ድማ በአንጻሩ እዚ ጽምዶ ዝበሃል ዘሎ ንስልታዊ ዕላማን ዕምቆትን ቅንዕናን ዘይብሉ እዩ ኢሳያስ ናይ ብሓቂ ጽምዶ ዝርድኦ ነይሩ እንተዝኸውን መጀመርያ ምስ ህዝቢ ጽምዶ ክገብር ዝግቦም ኣብ ውሽጢ ብዙሕ የገዝኡ ዘይሰርሖን ብፈትሒ ኣልቦነት ንልዕሊ 24 ዓመታት ኣብ ደልሃመት ተሰወሩ ወገናትና ክፈትሕን የቕረ ክብልን ዘይተረኣየ ከመይ ኣቢሉ ምስ ጎረቤት ጽምዶ ዝገብሮ ተኣማኒ ክኸውን ይኽእል እትጽምዶ ኢሎም ዝገልጽዎ ዘለውኸ ንምንታይ ሚኒስተራት ወከልቲ ህዝብን ላዕለዎት ሰበስልጣናት ሃገር ከም ተራ ሰባት ብኣክቲቪስት ክሕበሮምን ድንግርግር ክብሎምን ተደልዩ እቲ ፕሬዚደንት ኢሳያስ ከምዚ ኣፍቂዱ ከምዚ መብፃዓት እዩ ዝበሃልከ ብርክት ዝበለ ካብ ህዝብና እቲ ዕላማን ትርጉምን ናይቲ መልእኽቲ እንታይ ክመሓላለፍ እዩ ዝለ ዘሎም ኣብ ውሽጥና ሓገዝን ደበስን ዝጽበ ተኾርሚ ዝሓድር ውፅእ ህዝቢ የብልና እንድዩ ስለምንታይ ብፍሉይ ንትግራይ ጥራይ ዘነጻጽረ ጽምዶም ኣብዚ እዋን እዚ እቲ ዝጭፍጨፍን ኣብ ዝኸፍአ ሕሰምን ዘሎ ህዝቢ ኣምሓራኸም ህዝቢ ክልል ዓፋር ከንዳበለ ብዙሕ ሕቶታት ዘለዓል መልሲ ተግባር ዝህብ ዘሎም እቲ ገለገለ ብኤሊታት ተጋሩ ዝቐርብ ዘገርም ርእይቶታት ድማ እንተዳ ምስ ኤርትራ ክንዕራቕ ኮይንና ብቐዳምነት ኤርትራ ነቲ ኣብ ልዕሌና ዝፈጸመቶ ገበናት ይቕሬታ ከተሓተናን ካሕሳ ክትበናን ኣለዋም ወይ ድማ እትርክብና ናብ ሓደ ሃገር ዘጥርንፈና ክኸውን ኣሎም እዚ ብግልፂ ብውዕል ክግበር እምበር ብውልቀ ሰብ ጥራይ ህዝብን ባይትኡን ብወግዕ ንዘይፈልጦ ርክባት እንታይ ውሕስነት ኣለና ዝብሉ እዮም ወገን ኤርትራውያን ድማ ብኣንጻሩ እቲ ጽምዶ ዝነኣስ ስጉምቲ እዩ እንተኾነ ኣብ ጉዳይ ይቕሬታን ካሕሳን ብዝምልከት ዕፎን ብሸፈኑ ንሰላም ንስራሕ ክበሃል ስለ ዝተደልየ እምበር ጉዳይ ይቕሬታን ካሕሳን ተተላዒሉ ህዝቢ ኤርትራ ካብ ክልል ትግራይ ጥራይ ዘይኮነ ካብዛ ኢትዮጵያ ብቢልዮናት ዶላራት ትእውዶ ካሕሳ ከም ዘለዋን ኣብ ልዕሊ ወለዶታት ዝኸደ ክንደይ ሕብርታት ጆኖሳይድ ዴሞሳይድን ኤሊቶሳይድን ዳበልካ ዘስካሕክሕ ናይ ጆኖሳይድ ሕብርታት ተፈጸሞ ህዝቢ ኤርትራ ብሕጂ ካሕስኡን የቕሬትኡን ካሓተሉም ዝቕሉ ዓድታትና ዝነደልን ብታንክታት ተረግጸ ህዝብናን ብክላስተር ቦምባታትን ናፓልማትን ዝተለብለበ ህዝብናን ኣብ ልዕሊ ደቂ ኣንስትዮና ተፈጸመ ኣሽሓት ዓመጻትን ጸብጺብካ ዝውዳ ኣይኮነን። እዚ ብጣዕሚ ንህዝቢ ኤርትራ ዝፈጥረሉ ዓሚቕ በሰላታት ፈጺሙ ዝርስዕ ኣይኮነን ዝብሉ ብርክት ዝበለ ድምፅታት ሕቡር ብሄራውን ሃገራውን ህዝባውን ድምፅታት ከም ዘሎ ክፍለጥ ይግባእ ዝብሉ እዮም። ብዝኾነ ብሓፈሻ ክጥመት እንከሎ ፍቕርን ሰላምን ዝሕሰም ወገን እኮ ጸገም ዘለዎ እንዲ ንፍቕሪ ገዳዲፍካ ንጽልእ ገፋኪፍካ እየ ከም ዝበሃል ህዝብታት ከባቢና እወ ምስ ትግራይ ጥራይ ዘይኮነ ዋላ ምስ ካልኦት ህዝብታት ዝካየድ ናይ ሰላም ጽምዶ ብምሉእ ልብና ክድገፍ ዝግብኦ እኳ እንተኾነ ብግልጽን ብትካላውን ብናይ ህዝቢ ልኡላዊ ስልጣን ተሰረተ ዳ እምበር ሎሚ ህዝቢ ኤርትራ ኣብ ዘመነ መሳፍንቲ ይኮነን ዘሎ ሓደ ሰብ ወይ ውልቀ ሰብ ኣብ ላዕሊ ኮይኑ ከም ካሕ ዝበሎ ብዛዕባ ዕጫ ህዝቢ ክውስን ዘተዋህቦ ሕጋዊ ስልጣን የለን። ማቴዎስ ዘላለም
Alemseged Tesfai, the true voice of nation builders. The 2025 International Conference on Eritrean Studies was more than an academic gathering. It was a mirror held to the face of a country whose past remains contested, misrepresented, and in many ways unfinished. It was a place where I found myself reflecting on the one person who stood out, not just for what he wrote, but for what his presence meant. Alemseged Tesfai. While the conference featured a broad range of topics from archaeology and Adulis to diaspora diplomacy and climate strategies, the panel on Alemseged Tesfai felt like a return to something deeper. It brought forward a figure who does not only write Eritrea's story but safeguards it. He became the memory keeper we never deserved but urgently needed. I want to thank Dr. Bayan Nagash for recommending that I watch the full presentation. Had I not, I would have missed the most important reminder of the event, that our stories are worth telling and telling right. I also want to thank AAN Media for their coverage of his London tour, where they fittingly described Alemseged Tesfai as a mobile museum of Eritrea, a title that captures not just his wealth of knowledge, but his role in preserving and carrying our nation's memory with him wherever he goes. Alemseged, now in London on a book tour, remains more relevant than ever. I hope to get my hands on his English translation soon and plan to share my reflections with those who follow my work. But more than the books, it is the man's method that stays with me. During the panel, Professor Tej Ndar from Shulin University placed Alemseged within the global conversation on post-colonial writers. He was not just discussing literature. He was identifying integrity. He compared Alemseged with Raja Rao, Mulk Rajanand, Chinua Achebe, Mugi wa Thiong'o, and Frantz Fanon, not as a gesture of flattery, but to draw attention to the kind of authors who did not just document their nations, but defined them. At the end of his presentation, Professor Tidi invited the audience to ask questions. No one did. He smiled and said perhaps that meant everyone was happy. But silence, too, is revealing. Maybe we do not yet understand Alemseged's contributions. Or maybe we are too far behind the professor's framing to respond meaningfully. Either way, the absence of questions said as much as any response could. And outside such rooms, I have often heard louder voices, obviously those who condemn Alemseged not for inaccuracy, but for refusing to follow their script. Most of them are not historians. They are not scholars. They are not even readers of his work. Their critique is not intellectual but tribal. They want him to recite an Ethiopian or Tigrayan version of Eritrean history. He will not, and that is precisely why his work matters. Back to the good professor's address, Raja Rao gave India the quiet dignity of Gandhian resistance. Mulk Rajanand confronted caste and colonialism with raw empathy. Chinua Achebe restored the depth of African civilizations that Western texts denied. Ngugi rejected colonial languages and wrote in his own to reclaim what colonizers tried to erase. Frantz Fanon, trained as a psychiatrist, left everything to fight alongside Algeria's liberation army. He died young, but not before he wrote the words that would carry many more into revolt. Alemseged stands in that tradition. He left the comfort of academia in the United States and went to the field in Sahel. He chose the path of difficulty, not because he had no choice, but because he knew the story had to be told by someone who lived it. His short stories, plays, and essays are not entertainment. They are a national curriculum. Each piece holds the fragments of a country that needed to remember itself before the world told it what it was. If he and others like him had not written, then our history would be told by those who either misunderstand us or deliberately erase us. And indeed, that is the history Ethiopia has long tried to write. From the old narrative of being a Christian island surrounded by pagans, to the more recent fiction of Tigrinya identity as a shared national glue, Ethiopian historians have changed their story to fit the politics of the moment. One day we are family, the next we are a rebellious province. One day we are brothers, the next we are pawns of foreign powers. It depends on who is in power and what justifies their next invasion, treaty, or apology. This is why Alemseged matters. He is not baptized in the feudal school of Ethiopian history. He writes so we do not wake up one day to find our past rewritten by those who claim to know us better than we know ourselves. Some of us have long wished he would write the history from 1961 to independence. It remains an unfinished record. But he has openly said he needed more access, more sources, and more time. In a country where documents are sealed and memories are political weapons, perhaps it is wiser to wait than to write half a truth. That is intellectual integrity. That is what makes his work stand apart. Still, the fact that it took a global conference for Eritreans to publicly acknowledge his importance is revealing. A recognition of his kind should have come from within Eritrea, not from outside. But maybe that is the story of many of our heroes. Too valuable to be embraced until others applaud them first. If Eritrea wants to protect its story from being edited out of the region's past, it must begin by honoring those who told it well. Finally, Alemseged Tesfai is not merely a writer of history. He is the voice of those who built the nation with sacrifice, not slogans. In an era where loud politics often replace grounded truth, his words remain rooted in memory, in integrity, and in the unshakable belief that Eritrea deserves to know itself honestly. He speaks not to impress, but to preserve, and in doing so, he reminds us that true nation builders do not just fight for the future, they protect the past. That is why Alemseged Tesfai matters. Nasser Omer Ali, May 4th, 2025.